Welcome back to another episode of the Girl Boss Method podcast, hosted by myself, Ritu Bra. So tonight's episode is one of the education topics as requested by one of the ladies inside the program. And her question was all about health metrics. So obviously, when we are on a fitness program or a fitness journey, we might look at various different metrics to measure. And so some of those metrics might be things like, body weight or body fat or, various other metrics as well. And for this, we're not actually going to focus on body weight because body weight is unique to absolutely every single one of us. We shouldn't be validated by the weight on the scales. The scales can be a useful tool to have a look at how progress is going, to also predict how many calories we should be having, for example, whether we are looking at maintenance, a surplus, or even a deficit as well. Again, just having a look at things week to week, we can kind of see what's going on and see what's holding on as well. So there are various other metrics that we can use that we'll be talking about today. So please bear in mind that these are general guidelines. They don't take anyone's race or ethnicity or any other sort of personal things that make us all very unique. So just please bear that in mind. They are statistics or metric guidelines based on the female population. Again, very, very general. Okay, so when we're thinking about body fat percentages, again, when we're looking at athletes, that's really when you're going to see that 14 to 20% body fat marker. Now, please bear in mind, when we are thinking about athletes, we are probably likely thinking about athletes where body fat is very low because there is more lean muscle tissue, and perhaps maybe the sport may dictate a leaner physique. All right. So you are thinking about things like, track and field sports. So actually, if I'm honest, more like sprinting or endurance athletes. Again, we know that with some of the throwing sports and athletics, those ladies can have higher body fat. And again, it doesn't mean that they're not athletes, but again, please bear in mind, these are general guidelines. Okay. And then we're looking at people that are very, very fit. So very fit populations. We're looking at 21 to 24% body fat. Averages for general average people, we're looking at 25 to 31%. And then obese populations will be 32% and higher. So unfortunately, again, not specific to any ethnic backgrounds or even just you as an individual. So these are very general terms. But when we are looking at that higher body fat percentage, really what we want to have a look at is that healthy for you as an individual? And again, this is general guidelines. They are saying that 32% and higher is obese and up. Now, I know personally, for me, I have quite possibly been close to that or in that higher bracket, which sounds absurd because I would probably look at myself as being, and I know that people would look at me and say that, well, Ritu, you are petite and you're fit and you're healthy. There have definitely been periods in my life where I know that I haven't been healthy. I haven't had healthy habits, despite having worked in fitness or being around fitness. And actually, even when I was studying for my degree as well, there were periods as a university student where I was not, so to speak, healthy, maybe getting lots of steps in, training lots, but definitely not considering my diet. So that is something to be wary of. So when we are thinking about trying to improve these metrics, especially with body fat percentage, you want to change things in your diets. You want to ideally focus on those, whole foods, lean proteins, healthy fats, complex carbs, and to be healthful, avoid processed foods and sugary drinks. Exercise, incorporating a mix of cardiovascular exercise can help, and strength training as well. So lifting the weights and the body weights, for example, Pilates, etc. And lifestyle, we want to focus on adequate sleep, manage our stress, as these can impact our body fat levels. Interesting. So when we're thinking about muscle percentages, so there are not very widely agreed upon ranges like the body fat percentages, but again, there are general guidelines that we can go on. Body fat, I remember body fat percentages literally being dished out donkey's years ago, at the beginning of my health and fitness career, if you like, as well. We were looking at body fat percentages and stuff in the workplace. This was when I was a fitness instructor. So we are talking 20 years ago, when I had my first gym job. And I think I recall at the time to having 19% body fat, and I was pretty lean. I was quite active, lifting weights, doing gymnastics, running as well. So there were lots of different activities that I was doing to get me into that zone. So when we're thinking about muscle percentages, again, healthy ranges, they're looking at 30 to 40%, and athletes will typically have a higher percentage. Again, these are not specifically agreed upon. These are general guidelines. I feel like I'm going to repeat myself lots through this. So in terms of improving your muscle percentage, you want to engage in regular strength training. Surprise there? No. Strength training exercises, you want to help you build and maintain muscle mass. And you want to aim for at least 2 to 3 sessions per week where we are targeting all major muscle groups. Nobody needs to be doing weights in the gym 5 to 7 times a week. It's just not needed. Unless you are a bodybuilder competitor, you do not need to be doing that. 2 to 3 times a week, 3 to 4 if you're really into it. I think 4 is definitely the sweet spot. I think that's like the best of all worlds. You've got enough time to recover as well. Consider your protein intake as well. So you want a sufficient amount of protein to support your muscle growth and repair. So again, we're looking at 1.2 grams to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. Again, depending on your activity level and goals. When we're thinking about government guidelines are actually 0.8, but especially if you are looking to try and build that muscle and support it, 1.2 is the low end. I would definitely say more like 1.4 and upwards, maybe even 1.6 as a nice happy medium. And again, recovery. Yes, you want to recover between your workouts as well. And again, we can do things like, stretching and foam rolling to help support that muscle health as well. Water percentages. So yes, we've all heard that we are mostly built up of water. So water can range with our age and our body composition, but our general ranges healthily are 45 to 60%, and optimal hydration is more closer to 50 to 60%. So again, when we're thinking about water as well, we know that can have an effect on your body weight. We know that there can be some water retention as well, depending on the types of food that we have. So we are seeing fluctuations in the scale. If we know that we've had more carbohydrates present, we know that we are going to be retaining or holding more water. So for every 1 gram of carbs that you intake, you will hold at least 3 grams of water on top. So not everything on the weight scales is correlated to weight gain or fat mass. There is also a lot to do with water mass as well. So in terms of improving your water percentages, you want to hydrate. So you want to make sure you're drinking plenty of water, especially if you are active or live in a hot climate. And you want to limit the use of diuretics. So caffeine and alcohol can obviously mean that you need to have more water, okay, because they can deplete you in some ways. And then monitor the signs. So pay attention to things like dehydration, dark urine, dry skin, dizziness, cognitive function there as well, a decrease in that. So visceral fat percentage. So this is visceral fat is actually stored within the abdominal cavity and is linked with several health conditions. So measuring visceral fat percentage specifically is less common than measuring visceral fat level or rating. So when we're thinking about the range, again, we're thinking about the fat level or the rating. And again, this you can usually find on body composition scales, and 1 to 12 healthy and 13 to 59. Wow, that's a really steep number, is sort of the high risk area. So again, how do we measure visceral fat? So visceral fat is obviously stored around your internal organs and in the abdominal cavity, and it can be measured in several ways. So you've got bioelectrical impedance analysis, so the BIA scales. Now, what do they mean by this? I've actually got some more information on this as well in terms of how they do that. So again, the scales send a small electrical current through the body and measure the resistance to estimate your fat levels, okay? Then you have your waist circumference. So there is a general consensus that if you have a waist circumference over 35 inches or 88 centimeters for women, that is considered high and may indicate higher visceral fat levels. Remember that these are all guidelines as well. Waist to hip as well. So the way that you can measure your waist to hip circumference, you will divide the waist measurement by the hip measurement. Any ratio, the number that you get after that, it will be like 0 point something or other, or however that comes up. A ratio above 0.85 for women will suggest that you have higher visceral fat. Now, the next thing that we can do is have a look at DEXA scans, as more commonly known, so dual energy X-ray absorptiometry scans, DEXA, easy peasy. DEXA, I'm sure you've all heard of DEXA scans. So these can provide quite detailed body composition analysis. However, they're more expensive and they're less accessible. So I do know that you can go into like London to go and get a DEXA scan done. But again, why do we need to be doing this stuff? We can measure this stuff, but it's not massively important. I think maybe looking at some of maybe the waist circumference or the waist to hip ratio first. Yes, you can get MRIs done as well, but again, these are expensive. Why would you spend so much money on this stuff? Unless there is an actual reason. So if you're being used in a research study or something and they need to have really accurate analyses of the people that are in some of their research groups, then they might use some of this stuff. So I also wanted to kind of have a little word on what the difference would be between the two primary types of body fats. Obviously, we've just talked about visceral fat, but very quickly, I'll bring it to subcutaneous fat. So this is underneath your skin. The function, it acts as a protective layer for the muscles and the bones, and it insulates our body to regulate temperature and energy stores. The appearance is, it's the fat that you can pinch on your abdominals, so on your abdomen, on your thighs, and on your arms. It's totally normal. Now, yes, you can get excessive subcutaneous fat, And this may contribute to obesity-related health issues, but it's less harmful than the visceral stuff, okay? So the subcutaneous stuff is the stuff that we generally see when you kind of go, oh, you know, the fat's pinching over my jeans, or, you know, I'm not happy with that. I'm not happy with the way that looks. Guys, this is just body fat. It's a subcutaneous fat is not bad. And again, a lot of the time it's more for aesthetic pleasing reasons, but the visceral is the stuff that we cannot see, okay? This is the fat that we cannot see. And so we're thinking about body positivity, for example, and actually owning the fat that we have on our bodies, understanding that it has a purpose. It reminds us of being normal as well. I know that sometimes you kind of think, oh my God, I need to have the right muscle percentages and the right body fat percentages, and that means I'm healthy. These are all guidelines. But the reason why I've talked about this topic is because it was requested, okay? And so obviously I always want to try and talk about these topics and talk to you with an open mind about these as well. They're not massively important, but the visceral fat is an area that I thought, let's talk about this a little bit more. So again, it's, as mentioned, it's the stuff that's around your internal organs. So it will sit around your liver, pancreas, intestines. The function is, yes, it does provide cushions for organs, but in excess can lead to health problems. So the health impact, excess visceral fat is linked to a number of health risks, including heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, inflammation, and certain cancers. It is considered to be more dangerous than subcutaneous fat due to its proximity to vital organs and the role that it plays in our metabolic disturbances. So why is it fat? Why is the fat bad? Why is visceral fat bad? Again, we've kind of touched on it, but metabolic syndrome. So again, we're looking at all those conditions that it can increase. And with the increased inflammation or chronic inflammation, again, linked to several diseases, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers. We've kind of touched on all of this, but insulin resistance is one that we haven't talked about, but visceral fat will contribute to the insulin resistance. So whereby the body's cells become less responsive to insulin, and this can lead to higher blood sugar levels and eventually type 2 diabetes. So I often talk about the insulin. Insulin is a natural response. It will be released when we have, after we eat. Doesn't matter what kind of food we have, it will be released. And the idea is that it's trying to disperse the glucose or the blood sugar levels that are sitting in our blood. It's getting rid of the energy sources that are sitting around there and pushing them towards, cells, body cells to be utilized. So whether that be like fat cells or muscle cells, it's being pushed out. When we have insulin resistance, it's either because those cells become lazy and they are less responsive, or it could just be that there are such high elevated levels of, within the blood sugar. And again, that's all harmful stuff. It can cause the, damage to cells, whether it's nerve cells, fat cells, muscle cells, what have you. And again, just coming back to the visceral fat around the heart, in terms of a risk of heart disease. So it could build up fatty deposits within the arteries. And that's called atherosclerosis, and that can lead to heart attacks and strokes, very serious stuff. Organ function. So again, visceral fat can affect your vital organs. So fat around your liver can lead to non-fatty alcoholic liver disease, impacting your liver function. So these are things to be mindful of, okay? And this is two different types of fat. We've talked about the subcutaneous fat. That's generally the stuff that we see. And they're, again, within limits, as long as it's not in excess to where it can become a health issue, it's fine. If you are a person with higher body fat and it's the subcutaneous stuff and you're happy and you're confident, that is totally fine. But just a word on the visceral fat stuff anyway. So I just thought, it's serious stuff. We want to talk about that. So how do we fix it? How do we kind of like make sure that we don't get to those extreme levels? So you want to we can focus on reducing our refined carbs and sugars and increasing our fiber-rich foods, such as our vegetables, fruits, whole grains. So again, looking at that healthful diet is not to say that we cannot have nice things. We just need to maybe have less of them. I'm not a food excluder, unless it's something to do with your sort of ethical, moral stance, or you have an intolerance or an allergy, etc. Nobody needs to exclude foods in order to create an outcome, a dietary outcome. It's just about manipulating numbers and reducing things and not having so much of those. I mean, for goodness sake, if I could eat a donut every day, I'm sure I would, but I know that that's not going to contribute to my healthy outcomes. But a donut every now and then is fine, right? As long as it's not in absolute excess. So again, exercise, HIIT training can be really helpful. Cardiovascular exercise can be helpful. I do encourage these as part of our plans as well. I think they're good for us. It's good for heart health. It's good for getting more intensity within your workouts in a shorter period of time, especially if you are time poor, reducing your stress. Yoga, meditation, deep breathing exercises can help reduce that stress accumulation, because obviously that can help as well contribute to the accumulation of visceral fat. And sleep. Excuse me. Sleep. You want to aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. Poor sleep, again, is associated with higher levels of that visceral fat. So mega important. What does this tell you? General tips. So regular monitoring. So we're tracking our body metrics weekly. We're trying to be consistent with the same methods that we are using. Again, looking at things like body tape, that can really be helpful to see us making progress. Scales can be a part of that picture. And again, just even those check-in forms, ladies, those check-in forms are so important. Providing feedback on how your week has been helps the bigger picture as well and helps us change things when needed. Consistency. Consistency is always key. Make gradual, sustainable changes rather than drastic ones, and stay consistent with your healthy habits. And remember, we are the sum of all the things that we do regularly. So with that being said, it's all about trying to be a little bit more healthful. Get your steps in, get moving, get training, be consistent with it. We don't need to be, aggressive or extreme. It's all about building this stuff into your lifestyle. Right. That's all for me on this topic. I hope you found it interesting. If you have stumbled across this podcast, this has been the Girl Boss Method podcast. My name is Richu, and you can follow me on Instagram at Richu Bra. That's spelled RICHUBRAR. And we'll see you here next time.